At this point, you're ready to put the drive shaft bolts in. Use new drive shaft bolts. If you use the ones that end with part number 297, you do not need the stupid lock washers. You don't need anything. Torque them to at least 32 Newton meters, which we'll outline as soon as Sean gets these in. Don't forget your clamp. Now's a good time. You could still sneak it by and get this to just sit on the transmission while you're fucking around putting the drive shaft bolts in. Once you have the 4 bolts into the drive shaft flange, you can now torque them. This is the special adapter from BMW, which you don't have to use, but if you just use a wrench and your drive shaft bolts fall out, don't write to me crying that it's all my fault. We torque them to 32 Newton meters. I would grab that once again just to be sure, because you were right at the foot peg, the little nub of the foot peg down here. You got it. Good. Again, good to have a helper, or use a bungee. If you're doing it on the lift, use a bungee cord to the edge of the lift to hold the rear brake down. Our drive shaft bolts are torqued. The boot has been slid back onto the transmission. The clamp follows it. The clamp is tight. Our swing arm pivot pins are clean. You can see through it. So now, slide it onto a T-handle. You're going to line it up. You're going to move the swing arm around so you can line it up. And be careful with this, because they're easy to strip. It's just a frickin' aluminum threaded pin. And as we discussed earlier, this is where the feeler gauges come into play. Sean already has the pin installed on the left side. We're working on the right side right now. So now we're going to set the adjustment. Go over to your other side. Take a look here. Oh, that's way too tight. Now, there's no clearance here. So what does that mean? That means Sean needs to loosen his side, because I can't tighten the side anymore. You're probably good there. Let me see that. Let me chase this one. That's happy right there. Give that a little turn. I'm going to leave this in. You're going to hit that side with the torque wrench. 10 Newton meters on these pins. 15 Newton meters at most. This is a big problem with the later paralever bikes, where the rear paralever pivot gets sloppy. The manuals say 7 Newton meters. They're bullshit. It needs to be 10. These need to be at least 10. You're going to follow that up. This nut is going to get torqued to 105 Newton meters. You'll see the funky socket that I have that's cut out. That is so you can get in there with an Allen wrench and hold on to the center pin while it's being torqued. You can use paint marks. Yeah, this is why those other 27mm sockets are turned down on the lathe, because it's kind of tight in these frames. Well, Sean's fucking with that. I'll explain the paint mark issue. You can put a paint, when you think you're there, put a paint mark, nut and pin. Torque the nut. If they didn't move and they turn together, then you know you have a problem, and you need to find a way to secure the pin from turning so that just the nut turns. I'm going to check our clearance here again. We're good. We're good. This side's ready to be torqued. You're good. Use the 27. Yeah, use the one that's turned down on the lathe. Some of these frames are tighter than others. Give me a magic marker. Let me do a little explain what I was talking about. Here we go. So we got a mark here and a mark here. And that's what we wanted. Notice the nut moved, the pin stayed in place. So that side's all set. Sean's going to go over and do the other side now. We're going to take our grease gun. So you can do this like a one-handed asshole. And pump.
You already torqued the center?
No, I did not torque this. Yeah, I don't know if that's going to show up in the video or not, but I got to hold both of this. You hold the grease needle in, keep pumping until it starts to come out of the pivot joint. You can see right in here. See it pushing the grease out? That's what you want. Take your cap, and everybody's happy. Sean's got the other side torqued. We're going to grease that next, put the cap on, and we're done. At this point, you can adjust your clutch. Take an 8-inch straight piece of coat hanger. You're going to measure from the back of the ear on the transmission, here, to the center of the ball on the clutch cable. We are dead nuts right where it needs to be. No adjustment necessary. If it needed to be adjusted, the way you would do that, your cable length that we just measured, if that was incorrect, you would change that at the handlebar. You get your free play by adjusting it here on the transmission. So right now, since we're where we need to be, and the free play is acceptable, Sean's going to pull that clutch in. That will lock the center pin into position so that you don't have to use 2 wrenches here. Now I'll take my 13mm and tighten it. And now we'll check it again. Free play is good. We're all set. You can install your airbox now. What we're doing with this bike is we are getting rid of this secondary air system completely. You're just going to plug the holes in the airbox with this rubber grommet. You're only plugging the exterior holes. This one has already been done. Just push the rubber grommet in and you're all set. You're going to ask, well, what do you do about this? Take it off. Take a tubing cutter, cut it. Take the nut off. Stick a washer in it. Weld it and grind it. And then this will thread right onto here. We're going to put copper anti-seize on this, of course. And I'm going to paint it as well. And you have yourself a bike without a secondary air system. Replace this crossover hose and try to use the regular rubber fuel injection line stuff instead of the braided cloth hose. Let's see, anyway. We have our plugs installed here, and once we get this lined up, there we go. You can pull this rubber in the front and after. We also replaced this grommet since we're doing away with that vacuum port. And instead of reinstalling the stud that went in the front corner here, we're going to use an Allen bolt So we're going to replace both those fronts with Allens. A little bit of copper on them, which Sean just did on his. And trade some of that. Yeah, that's good enough. A little bit of copper anti-seize on here. And you get the idea. Get those two started and then put the bolt in the bottom of the air box. Then put your air filter back in and the lid. This last step is very important. Peel this boot off of the speedometer cable holder. This piece here is actually just a holder. It slides off. You're peeling this back a little bit. You're going to get some black RTV. You want to fill that boot up. Explain why in a second. Fill that boot up. Slide this back into place. The fucking output flange just gotta turn a little bit. Can you drop this in gear, Sean? There we go. Now slide the boot on the rest of the way. You gotta kind of work around it. There we go. That's captured it. Now you're gonna take a zip tie. Slight difficulty with one hand here. Gonna run a zip tie around the top of the boot. Tighten it up good. Snip off the excess with a real pair of side cutters so there's no barb left on the zip tie. Turn it around so it faces the rear, it's out of sight. You wipe off the rest of the silicone that's splooged out, and you're done. And what that does is prevent water. If the bike's sitting outside or you ride in the rain or whatever, water runs down this speedometer cable, and without the silicone and the zip tie, it goes right through that boot, right into the transmission, keeps that rear bearing wet, corrodes, seizes, and eventually spins in its place and destroys the back cover of the transmission. So this little tip should save you some money in the future. And that's about it. Sean's putting the airbox back together now. Our carbs are cleaned, ready to go back together. But we're pulling the cylinders off of this next to do push rod tube seals, and that's going to be tomorrow's comedy show. And then we still have to get into the front end and do the steering head bearings and the rest of the work. So that's it for today. Tune in tomorrow. I thought we were done. Stupid me. Sean pointed out maybe somebody is not going to know how the fuck these things all go back together. So, this horn bell end goes inside the airbox. The other end with these two bumps, this actually goes against these two grooves in the airbox here. So, you're going to shove that fucking thing right in there. Twist and turn till you get it right up like that. This will now fit into there. We've got the other one, so I'll show you how this goes this way. Hold on a second, Sean. There's also a groove in this airbox, as you can see here. This part fits in that. So we'll shove this through. Got a slimy mess. The piss poor excuse for a freaking crankcase ventilation system, but what do I know? And that's it. Now you got this metal piece. It's going to slide right into place here. That expands the rubber, and everything is held in place now. Good job, Sean. Taking a lot longer than we expected today, but that's what happens when we try to make a movie out of this fucking production. Customer doesn't pay more, it ends up costing me more, but that's life. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope it was educational, and don't let your meatloaf.